history, but the father of all specialties of medicine is considered to be Hippocrates. During this period, there was a change in the way these peoples or culture understood medicine. They began trying to reason why pathologies and diseases happened. They tried to put distance from the magical beliefs. They believe in a supernatural force as the whole cause of pathologies. That doesn't mean that they didn't believe in these supernatural forces as a factor to end up having a pathology, but they started thinking that there should be other causes apart from these external natural supernatural forces in the origin of pathologies and diseases. These first physicians or medical practitioners during the classical period that, as we'll see, began developing what we know as the basis of the scientific method that we still use today. These practitioners could be trained in schools or couldn't, so there wasn't a specific regulated medical training. Indeed, most of them received training in biology or medical practices, but also philosophy, calculus, arithmetics. So they, during this period, they were trained in all specialties or fields of sciences. They had a specific god of medicine that was called Asclepius, and they had specific temples dedicated to him. And there were two kinds of schools. The school, of course, that whose leader was Hippocrates, and they were focused in understanding medicine based on the study of the patient, the observation and examination of the patient. And then there was another school called the School of Needle that's not so relevant because it didn't last for long. And they were more focused in understanding medicine based or being focused in the disease in itself. Well, specifically for the school of Hippocrates, we know, because this is the school that invented the scientific method. So the scientific method is the method that tries to answer the origin of any pathology based on observation, examination, reasoning, and that is what Hippocrates invented, and this method has been followed since the days of Hippocrates until nowadays. Obviously, we have changed this method because now we're practicing a scientific experimental method or medical method. That means that apart from reaching or reasoning, observing, and so on, we're testing our theories. We are trying to prove our theories, our hypotheses, something that the classical Greeks and the following cultures didn't do. So, Hippocrates invented the scientific method to try to find out the origins of different pathologies. That's why he's considered the father of medicine. He originated or started the period of speculative scientific medicine. So, the speculative scientific medicine, if you remember when we were classifying the different kinds kinds of medicine. This kind of medicine, the speculative scientific medicine, where theories or hypotheses weren't proved by carrying out experiments. This kind of medicine was originated or invented by Hippocrates in the classical Greek period. So, what he said and what was so revolutionary is that there should be a method to diagnose a pathology, and also there should be a kind of method to implement a treatment. So for the diagnosis, he recommended following these 4 steps. First, having the conversation with the patient, then examining the patient, the lesions, the symptoms this patient had, following the observation of the environment. If, for example, the patient had consumed specific foods or had drunk specific water, to try to find out causes that triggered the disease. And here is where we start seeing this belief in the idea that the pathologies were originated only by the will of supernatural forces. And finally, the last step, reasoning, that was one of the strongest characteristics of these first scholars, their ability to reason, to reach conclusions based on all these observations that obviously made sense. Okay, so this is more or less, this composes the steps of the scientific speculative method. The following step that they didn't do would be carrying out experiments to prove that our reasoning or the conclusions they reached were true or not. But they didn't do that. Well, the objective of this diagnosis was descriptive, explanatory, and predictive description of the disease and their symptoms. The explanation trying to explain or say why this disease began affecting an individual, and predictive, trying to guess if the patient would heal or not. Regarding the treatment, there were some rules like paying attention or the observation of the opportunity to treat the patient. There was the theory that was based in the idea of curing by contraries. These first medical practitioners believed in the idea that the body was composed of different fluids. For fluids specifically, this is the humoral theory, and during or when an individual was healthy, these fluids were completely in equilibrium, well balanced inside the body. When a pathology developed, that meant one or more of these fluids were suffered an imbalance. So they believed that by treating or curing the opposite fluid, they would establish or rebalance the equilibrium of the fluids inside the body. Well, they also treated the whole body, not only the part or the organ that was affected by the disease. So here we can see some of the characteristics of some of these alternative medicines that are practiced even today, like the cure by contraries or this idea of treating the whole body, not only the region or the part of the body that is affected by the disease. When they implemented any treatment, because obviously their knowledge in diseases was very narrow, they always tried to follow the kind of fixed pattern. First, they recommended changes in diet, in the diet of the patient, usually trying or recommending to follow a plant-based diet. If the changes in the diet didn't heal the patient, they would then recommend specific drugs, but these drugs were always natural drugs, plant-based remedies, medicinal plants that they knew having some specific medicinal properties. And finally, if the pharmacotherapy didn't work either, they would try to perform some surgery, some surgical interventions, but these surgical interventions were minor interventions for the current standards, because they didn't have any anesthetics. They knew some plants that were kind of narcotic or had anesthetic properties, but this anesthesia was very superficial. So their surgical interventions were discouraged, and until there was any other solution left, until the last step, when they carried them out, these surgeries were minimally invasive for our standards. Specifically in dentistry, well, there is this work that is very important, okay? The Corpus Hippocraticum. This is considered to be the companion of the whole medical knowledge of Hippocrates. But Hippocrates didn't write this corpus. This corpus was gathered together by a later physician, Galen, that we'll see during the Roman period. Was gathered together and kind of written or published by Galen, saying that this compendium of books was covering the whole knowledge that Hippocrates was teaching during the period he practiced medicine. But again, the Corpus Hippocraticum wasn't written by Hippocrates. So, in this corpus that we consider was or has the teachings of Hippocrates, we see some brief references to dentistry. There are references to descriptions of the development of the teeth, and also to pathologies that affect or have as symptoms the loss of teeth. There are descriptions of pathologies that include toothaches or odontalgias and remedies to cure them. And finally, as a last step to try to cure these odontalgias mainly, we find the descriptions of techniques and the tools or instruments to carry out dental extractions. But as we will see and we have seen in different cultures, tooth extractions were considered, again, like the surgeries, the last step, the last resources because of the implications that could derive from having a tooth extracted, like having an infection that could be spread to the whole body. They didn't have antibiotics either. There are descriptions and pictures of forceps used by Hippocrates and his followers that are kind of similar to the tools that are used nowadays, like these tweezers, or here these forceps that they called odontara. We'll see how the Romans had similar tools. The Romans mainly used the Greeks' knowledge. They weren't so inventive, so proliferous as the Greeks, but they changed the names of the tools to make them own. So the Romans called these forceps tenaculums. We'll see it later. But the Greeks, odontara. Okay. Well, during the Hellenistic period, we have said classical period, Hippocrates, the humoral theory, the speculative scientific method, his recommendations to carry out a diagnosis and then the steps to implement the treatment. Now, during the last period of the classical Greek culture, the Hellenistic period, we find as a main author Aristotle, again a scholar that cultivated many areas of the sciences, not only biology or medicine, but he was very focused in biology. He carried out comparative studies in animals and tried to interpret the organization of an animal body and transfer it to the human's body. That led him to state many wrong observations. For example, he said that men had more teeth than women, and this idea was prevalent during thousands of years until the modern era, which is kind of weird because they would have had to count the teeth of both women and men to see that was completely wrong, but anyways. And then he also believed that the teeth grew permanently or grow permanently throughout our life. And that is an observation that he made based on the fact that when a tooth lacks the opposite tooth, so for example the mandibular tooth lacks the maxillar tooth, the opposite, and there is no occlusion for that tooth, the tooth tends to be abused or to look for an opposite contact. So it seems like the tooth is growing, but the tooth is being avulsed from the alveolar bone, looking for a contact, looking for a function to do. Obviously, he didn't know that. Other relevant authors of this period are Herophilus and Erasistratus. They did or carried out human dissection, so they described the human anatomy more accurately than Aristotle, and they were the first in describing the dental vascularization accurately. So saying that there were some blood vessels going from the mandibular or maxillary bone into the inside of the roots, the dental roots. We have as well Diocles Callistatus, who put relevance to dental hygiene, recommending rubbing the teeth with different plant-based preparations like mint preparations. He was the first in describing the third molar as, or by the term, wisdom tooth. So our name wisdom tooth comes from this ancient period. He said that this tooth was the last tooth in being erupted in the mouth, and it was kind of the tooth that appeared when a teenager or a child became an adult. That's why he called it wisdom tooth, when he considered the person had arrived to a wisdom age. This tooth would erupt. He described different techniques to treat mandibular fractures, the same as with other archaic or ancient cultures. The mandibular fractures seemed to be very common, probably because of accidents or because of different violent events. And he also described techniques to carry out reimplantations, either because the tooth has been abused or to try to replace teeth that have been lost. We'll see how, for example, during the Middle Ages it was common that poor people donated or sold their teeth for the rich people to replace the teeth that they lost. So the ancient Greeks carried out this practice as well. The Etruscans. The Etruscans were kind of contemporary to the Greeks as well as the Romans until the Romans conquered them. This culture was a very, very developed culture in the midst of their knowledge. They had a deep knowledge in metallurgy, sculpture, as well as other artistic pieces or fields. Specifically in dentistry, we have found very sophisticated dentures and fixed prosthetics made by these cultures, the people that belonged to the Etruscan culture. Here we have different pictures of these prosthetics. Well, this is a sculpture, okay? But here we find tooth crowns that are very similar to the fixed crowns we use nowadays. Here a bridge used or designed by the Etruscans. Here we have another picture that follows the same concept as we're using nowadays when we design fixed prosthetics, more or less, obviously. But the basic idea of using the remaining two teeth in the mouth as the structure to hold fake teeth or the absent teeth is there, which is the basic design of our fixed prosthetics as well. Well, the Romans. The Romans ended up conquering both the Etruscans, the Greeks, as well as many other cultures, as all of you know. They developed a culture with a deep knowledge in different sciences, but they mainly used the Greeks' knowledge or the Etruscan knowledge, the knowledge that they took from the cultures they were conquering as a basis for the development of their own scientific knowledge. They were innovative, but not as much as the cultures that preceded them. They considered any manual task or manual work as a low rank. So even when they cultivated the knowledge in medicine, that's the field that interests us, they didn't carry out the practice of medicine. That was something that was considered, again, low class, and they left the Greeks or the slaves to carry out these medical practices. During this era, well, barbers didn't extract teeth. This is relevant because we'll see how after the Romans, during the whole Middle Ages, the barbers were the individuals that carried out dental extractions. And they gave very huge relevance to the teeth, to preserving the teeth, and to the dental hygiene. Some of the relevant authors of this period or this culture, Cornelius Celsus, he wrote this work, De Medicina. In the fifth book of this work, he speaks about the use of specific narcotic drugs, plant-based drugs, to try to heal or relieve the dental pain or toothache. Here we have descriptions of the Roman forceps that was mainly the same as the Greeks forceps, but with another name, tenaculum. They called it tenaculum, but it was the same as the odontara. There are descriptions of filling cavities to prevent the fracture of the tooth, and recommendations to follow a good oral or dental hygiene by the removal of tartar with specific tools, scrapers, and using mouth rinses. He also describes techniques, again, to treat maxillary or mandibular fractures. Well, Pliny the Elder, he wrote recommendations in dentistry for relieving the dental pain, the toothache, by using plant-based remedies. And he correctly associated the oral pathologies or infections with bad habits, bad hygiene or low hygiene, dental hygiene, and also consuming, and this is interesting, consuming specific foods. Most of them, the foods that he describes, are sugar-based or carbohydrate-based foods. So his observations were very accurate. And then Galen. We have to say that Galen was Greek, but he practiced in Rome, and he's, because of that, or considered to be inside the Roman period. But he was Greek. He was the one that I was speaking about earlier. He was who wrote the Hippocratic corpus. He gathered together all the Hippocrates teachings and wrote them down in a single work, the Hippocratic corpus. He carried out comparative anatomical studies, the same as Aristotle. He corrected some errors Aristotle had, but made his own. He's the first that numbered the teeth in different groups, or organized the teeth in incisors, canines, and molars. He considered premolars and molars the same kind of tooth. And he described the innervation of the teeth. Remember that we had already described the vascularization of the teeth, but not the innervation, and Galen did it. And, but for example, his theory for the development of decay was following the Hippocratic theory because of an imbalance of the body fluids, following this humoral theory. Well, he had some remedies against the gingivitis and the toothache, again, as most of these authors based on medicinal plants. Well, here we have a picture of the Roman forceps, the tenaculus, that is the same as the Greek forceps. They used as well the concept of dental bridges that the Etruscans had. So they assimilated all the knowledge these previous cultures had developed. You don't have to remember this. This is the recipe for a specific toothpaste. You don't have to remember all the ingredients, but it gives an idea of the importance that dental hygiene had for the Romans. They had their own recipes to use toothpastes to brush their teeth, to clean their teeth. Well, and finally the Roman period in Spain. So as many other regions in Europe, Spain was conquered by the Romans. There are records from authors in Spain recommending the use of urine as a mouthwash. This is something anecdotal or anecdotic that we find in many other regions. It's not only specific for the Spanish regions. We have found some archaeological remains of this period in which there are tooth or dental bridges made of gold, fillings or kind of restorations made of gold, and so on. Again, this is common to the whole Roman Empire regions or the Roman era. Well, we find specifically as authors in Spain during the Roman period, this author, Gaius Plinius Secundus, who wrote this work, Naturalis Historia, and he had some specific recommendations for toothpaste preparations, and well, again, the mouthwash thing, this is not important. So basically here you have to remember that this author, Gaius Plinius Secundus, belongs to the Roman Hispanic period, and he had recommendations for dentifrice or toothpaste preparations. And then the other main author in the Spanish region, is San Isidoro de Sevilla. He wrote in his work etymologies. He has more references to the map. For example, he was the first in describing the parotids, even when his description wasn't completely accurate, but this is the first reference in history that in which we find, or the first reference to parotids in history. He again repeated the Aristotle error about the men having more teeth than women, and described again the different kinds of teeth, incisors, canines, and then molars. One of the main characteristics of this period of the Gothic Spania is the idea that the sickness, the ill, the patient was in the center of the attention of medicine. So diseases and pathologies weren't so important, but the sick, the ill people, the patient was what was important. That was in accordance with the Christian teachings. And that's all.